Hello everybody, let's do some reading. Would you like to? Thank you. Now let's get reading! This book is called Mr Nosey by Roger Hargreaves. Let's go to the first page. Mr Nosey liked to know about everything that was going on. He was always poking his nose into other people's businesses. Mr Nosey was the sort of a person who, if they came upon a locked door, he couldn't resist looking through the keyhole to see why the door had been locked. And it's always good to have your door locked so no intruders can come in. Back to the story. Mr Nosey was the sort of a person who, if he found an unopened letter addressed to somebody else, would simply have to open it to find out what was inside of it. Mr Nosey was the sort of a person who, if he was sitting reading his newspaper on the train, would much rather read the newspaper of the person sitting next to him. And his nose would always be too long, so it would go behind the other person's newspaper. Naturally, as you might well imagine, Mr Nosey was not very popular. People did not like the way in which Mr Nosey would peek and pry into their affairs. Would you like it? Oh, well, I wouldn't like it too. But back to the reading. People did not like the way in which they did not like it at all. But did that stop Mr Nosey peeking and prying? It did not. Mr Nosey lived in a funny tall thin house in a place called Tiddletown. The people of Tiddletown decided that Mr Nosey was becoming too much nosy. And so they held a meeting to discuss what to do about him. Do you wonder what they're planning? Ooh, me too. We must find some way of stopping him being so nosy, said old Mr Chips, the town carpenter. Mr Chips is a funny name, do you think? That's right, said Mrs Watcher, who ran the Tiddletown laundry. He needs to be taught a lesson. If only we could think of a way to stop him poking his nose into everything, said Mr Brush the painter. And then a small smile spread over his face. Listen, he said, now grinning, I have a plan. All his friends gathered around to listen to his plan. Do you think it will be mean? Oh. Well, I think it would, though. The following morning, Mr Nosey was out walking along Tiddletown High Street when he heard somebody whistling behind one of the closed doors. I wonder what's going on there, he thought to himself, and tiptoeing up to the door, he quietly opened it like this and peeped in. What? I think his nose gave himself away. Splash! Went a very wet paintbrush right on the end of Mr Nosey's nose, covering it with bright red paint. Do you like getting red-nosed? Well, I think it's an accident. Oh dear, I am sorry, said Mr Brush. Who was painting the inside of the door? Poor Mr Nosey had to go straight home to try and remove the red paint, which was very difficult and rather painful. Or painful, just for a little joke. Mr Brush chuckled to himself. The plan had begun. The following day, Mr Nosey was walking past the laundry when he heard somebody laughing on the other side of the wall. I wonder what's going on here, he thought to himself, and standing on tiptoe, he looked over the wall. Snap! Went a clothes peg right on the end of Mr Nosey's nose. Oh dear, I am sorry, said Mrs Washer, who was hanging up clothes on the washing line on the other side of the wall. Poor Mr Nosey removed the clothes peg and went off down the street feeling extremely sorry for himself and for his poor red nose. Now it's really red because it hurt, but the red paint is gone. Mrs Washer chuckled to herself. The plan was working. The next day, Mr Nosey was going past the fence when he heard hammering. I wonder what's going on here, he thought to himself, and creeping very quietly, like this, tiptoe, 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 to the end of the fence, he peeped around. Bang! Went a hammer right on the end of Mr Nosey's nose. Oh dear, I am sorry, said old Mr Chips, who was nailing up a loose plank in the fence. Poor Mr Nosey had to go home immediately and bandage his poor red sore nose. His red, poor, sore nose. That's a better way to say it. Mr Chips grinned a broad grin. The plan was working very well indeed. Very well. There's a couple more pages left, guys, so hang on. The following day, Mr Nosey was walking in the woods when he heard somebody sawing some of the trees, which was wood. I wonder what's going on here, Mr Nosey thought to himself. And he crept up behind a tree. He was just about to peer out from behind the tree when it suddenly occurred to him that if he did, something very nasty might happen to his nose. And so he went on his way without being nosy. Behind the tree, a saw raised in his hand, stood Mr Herd Farmer. When he saw that Mr Nosey had gone on his way without being nosy, he laughed and laughed and laughed. The plan had worked. Mr Herd hurried into Tittledown to tell everybody. The plan really had worked, because after that, Mr Nosey stopped being nosy and soon became very good friends with everybody in Tittledown. And that is the end of the story, except to say that if you are ever tempted to be as nosy as Mr Nosey used to be, you better expect one thing: a sore nose. If you liked that story, click the subscribe button, give me a like, and see you next time. Bye! Also, click that bell. Thanks for watching.